Something happened last week near the Strait of Hormuz that military planners in Washington and Tel Aviv are still trying to wrap their heads around. A US MQ-9 Reaper drone, the same surveillance machine the Pentagon pays $30 million a unit for, was shot clean out of the sky. Not by a fighter jet, not by an expensive Russian-built air defense battery, but by a weapon that almost nobody outside of Iranian military circles had heard of 48 hours before it happened. Iran called it the Arash-e Kamangir, and even the name is a statement. In ancient Persian mythology, Arash was the greatest archer who ever lived. The legend says he climbed to the top of a mountain, drew his bow with every last ounce of strength in his body, and fired a single arrow so far that it flew for an entire day, and wherever it finally landed became the permanent border of Iran. He gave everything he had to draw the line. Iran did not pick that name by accident, and military analysts from London to Washington are now asking a very serious question. Did that arrow just redraw the lines of this entire conflict? Today, we're going to break down exactly what the Arash-e Kamangir is, why analysts say it matters, what it tells us about the profound shift in how Iran fights today versus how it fought just 12 months ago, and most importantly, what the hard numbers say about who is actually winning the long game in this war. Because here's the thing, the most decisive battlefield in this conflict is not a desert or a strait or a missile silo. It's a spreadsheet, and right now, the arithmetic is not looking good for Israel or the United States. Stay with me. This one is worth every minute. Let's start with what we know and what we don't about this new system, because honest analysis has to begin with that line. On or around May 25th of 2026, Iranian state media announced that a domestically built air defense system called the Arash-e Kamangir had just been used in combat for the very first time. The target, a General Atomics MQ-9 Reaper drone flying near Qeshm Island deep in the Strait of Hormuz. The Reaper is the Pentagon's workhorse, used for surveillance, intelligence gathering, and airstrikes. The price tag on a single unit runs between $16 and $30 million. Iran claims the Arash-e Kamangir shot it down. The U.S. has not officially confirmed or denied the specific claim. What we do know is that tracking records and satellite monitoring show the drone is gone. Security analyst Alex Almeida of the Horizon Engage intelligence platform told Al Jazeera the incident is significant precisely because of what it suggests about Iran's surviving capabilities after months of sustained strikes on its military infrastructure. But here's what makes this weapon genuinely different. And this is where the story gets interesting. For decades, air defense systems operated on a predictable model that everyone understood. You build a big radar dish, you wire it to a battery of interceptor missiles, you plant the whole installation somewhere strategically important, and you defend your airspace from there. The problem with that model? Your enemy can see the radar dish from space. They know exactly where the launchers are. They hit them first. And that is exactly what happened to Iran in June of 2025. When Israeli airstrikes in what became known as Operation Rising Lion reportedly destroyed roughly two-thirds of Iran's fixed missile launchers in under 2 weeks. Iran paid an enormous price for depending on those large, visible, expensive, and ultimately findable systems, so they changed the playbook entirely. Defense analysts who have examined open-source imagery of the Arash-e Kamangir believe it is what military experts call a pop-up system. It fits on a wheeled armored vehicle. You drive it to a position, deploy, engage, and move before the enemy can respond. Rather than broadcasting radar signals that can be detected and targeted from hundreds of kilometers away, analysts believe it uses electro-optical sensors, advanced heat-seeking, and camera-based targeting to locate and lock onto its targets without ever announcing itself. Dr. Mark Hilborn, senior lecturer in security studies at King's College London, summed it up for Al Jazeera in a single sentence that should be highlighted in every defense briefing right now. Iran has gotten, in his words, clever at changing the economics of warfare. Cheap, simple systems can hold much more complex systems at risk. That sentence is the entire story. Let's prove it with the numbers. If you're following this channel for the first time, we do exactly this kind of breakdown, weapons, strategy, the real economics behind the headlines every week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, let's get into the math, because this is where it gets genuinely alarming. Here's what you need to understand about modern warfare before we go any further. Wars are not just won with bullets and explosions. They're won with factory output, supply chains, and bank balances. And right now, Iran has figured out something that is making military economists very uncomfortable. A Shahed drone, the loitering attack drone that Iran manufactures domestically and which Russia has been using by the tens of thousands against Ukraine, costs somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 to build. That is roughly the price of a nice used car. In some configurations, domestic production estimates put it even lower. The U.S. Patriot missile used to intercept one of those drones costs $4 million. That is the price of a large house in most American cities. The THAAD Interceptor, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, costs $12.8 million per shot. A ship-based SM-3 ballistic missile interceptor runs between $10 and $28 million every time you pull the trigger. Now hold those numbers in your mind while I give you the operational picture. During the height of the conflict this spring, reports indicated Iranian drones were being launched across 5 separate theaters simultaneously. The economic analysis group Bruegel, which is not an Iranian state outlet but a respected European research institution, published findings showing that Gulf states alone had already expended hundreds of Patriot missiles, $4 million each, to shoot down Iranian Shaheds that cost, at the absolute most, a few tens of thousands of dollars each. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The Pentagon is scheduled to purchase just 37 THAAD interceptors in all of 2026, 37 for the whole year. Meanwhile, Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer, produces fewer than 20 SM-3 interceptors per year under current procurement schedules. Meanwhile, Iran has a dedicated drone production facility operating inside Russia at an industrial zone called Alabuga, with an estimated annual output of 10,000 Shahed-type drones per year. Not to mention its domestic production lines. One side is spending millions to destroy things that cost thousands. The factories that make the expensive interceptors physically cannot keep pace with the factories making the cheap attackers. Atlantic Council non-resident fellow Danny Citrinowicz said it directly and without diplomatic softening. The Iranians are launching drones that cost around $30,000, and we are using missiles that cost millions of dollars to intercept them. That gap is a very problematic one. A problematic one. That might be the understatement of 2026. Because this is not a one-off imbalance. It is what the defense research firm Kuwa calls Iran's core strategic doctrine, interceptor depletion. Their words are worth repeating exactly. The Shahed program's primary function, they write, is not target destruction, it is interceptor depletion. Each Shahed that forces a Patriot launch has fulfilled its strategic purpose, even if it is destroyed 15 kilometers from its target. Let that sink in. Iran wins by forcing you to shoot. Even when they miss, you lose. To understand why all of this reached the critical point it's at right now, we need to go back to June of 2025, because what happened then set the stage for everything we're watching today. 12 months ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a massive air campaign targeting Iran's nuclear facilities, its air defense networks, and its missile production infrastructure. The results were significant on paper. Analysts estimated Israel destroyed around 2/3 of Iran's ballistic missile launchers during the 12-day conflict. Iran's total missile inventory, which intelligence assessments had placed at roughly 2,500 before the fighting, was estimated to have fallen to somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 afterward, after Iran fired off hundreds in retaliation and lost more on the ground. By conventional military accounting, that looks like a decisive result, but here is the critical detail that got buried in the coverage of who hit what. When Iran's leadership surveyed the destruction, they did not try to rebuild exactly what they had lost. They rebuilt differently, mobile instead of fixed, dispersed instead of concentrated, cheaper instead of more expensive. The February 2026 intelligence assessment published by the Israel Alma Research Center, not an Iranian source, confirmed that Iran had adopted a new military doctrine, rehabilitating air defense capabilities, restoring ballistic missile production, and accelerating the fortification of key facilities, all using a more resilient, decentralized model. By late 2025, intelligence reports indicated Iran was producing ballistic missiles at a rate of dozens per month. By early 2026, Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly estimated the figure had reached over 100 missiles per month. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, in a formal military balance assessment published in April of this year, concluded bluntly that Iran would devote high priority to rebuilding and improving its missile and drone capabilities, and that the rebuild was already substantially underway. Now, here's the part of this story that nobody's talking about loudly enough. The Israeli missile defense systems that inflicted so much damage on Iran's arsenal in June 2025, they burned through enormous portions of their own inventories to do it. Defending against roughly 500 Iranian missiles during those 12 days consumed what the Foreign Policy Research Institute described as nearly a quarter of Israel's Interceptor stockpile and several years' worth of production output in under 2 weeks. By the war's final days, unnamed U.S. officials were telling reporters that Israel was already husbanding its interceptors, military language for rationing, saving what's left because you cannot replace it fast enough. The Foreign Policy Research Institute made the production reality concrete. Lockheed Martin produces fewer than 20 SM-3 interceptors per year under current plans. The 12-day war consumed more than a full year's production in under 2 weeks. And the planned procurement level going forward, according to U.S. budget documents, 12 SM-32A interceptors per year from fiscal year 2024 onward, 12 a year. Iran is producing over 100 ballistic missiles a month and thousands of drones annually. You do not need a military degree to see where that trajectory leads. Iran fired the arrows, Israel ran low on shields, and Iran is already filling its quiver back up. Now let's zoom out from the Strait of Hormuz and look at the full picture, because the Arash-e Kamangir is just one piece of a much larger military transformation that is happening inside Iran right now. In May of 2025, Iran unveiled an upgraded version of a ballistic missile called the Hajj Qassam. The newest version has an extended range of 1,200 kilometers. It uses solid fuel, which means it can be launched much faster than older liquid-fueled designs that take time to prepare. Iranian state media, and this claim has not been independently confirmed, says it carries a modified warhead designed to maneuver mid-flight in order to penetrate layered air defense systems equipped with what they describe as an advanced navigation system to counter electronic warfare. A range of 1,200 kilometers covers a very large portion of the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Russia-Iran military relationship has deepened in ways that will affect this conflict for years. According to documents leaked from the Russian arms corporation Rostec, Russia is expected to supply Iran with 48 advanced Su-35 fighter jets, fourth-generation plus aircraft, in exchange for Iran continuing to operate and expand its Shahed drone production for Russian use. Russia has launched over 38,000 of those Iranian-designed drones against Ukrainian targets since the arrangement began. Put that together, Iran gains a fleet of advanced fighter jets, Russia gains tens of thousands of proven combat drones. Both gain a production and technology partnership specifically designed to stress test Western air defense systems. In Ukraine, in the Middle East, simultaneously. That is not a peripheral development. That is a structural military alliance reshaping two separate active conflicts at once. And this is exactly why this channel exists. To connect those dots and show you the full picture that daily news coverage rarely has time for. If this kind of analysis matters to you, subscribe now and share this video with someone who's trying to understand what's actually happening in this region. The people who see through the noise deserve to find each other. Now, because balance matters, let's talk about what Israel has in development that could genuinely change the equation. Israel's Iron Beam laser air defense system completed its first operational deployment in late 2025 and reportedly engaged a drone in early 2026 in what would be its first combat use. The concept behind it is, without exaggeration, economically revolutionary. Instead of a $4 million missile, you fire a laser beam. The estimated cost per engagement is somewhere between $3 and $10 in electricity. If that system works reliably at scale, it collapses the entire cost asymmetry argument in Israel's favor. A $10 shot at a $30,000 drone is economics that Israel can sustain indefinitely. But, and this is a significant but, the Iron Beam is early in its operational life. The system performs best against slower, lower-altitude threats like Shahed drones. Ballistic missiles traveling at hypersonic speeds on steep re-entry angles are a fundamentally different targeting problem, and the system has to be produced, deployed, hardened, and networked at scale before it can make a decisive difference across the full range of threats Iran can generate. The technology race is genuinely alive. Both sides are innovating, and the outcome is not predetermined. So where does all of this leave us? Iran has just demonstrated in active combat conditions that it can develop and deploy new weapon systems quickly, systems built specifically to survive the kind of campaign designed to destroy exactly this capability in June of 2025. The Arash-e Kamangir, whether it turns out to be a revolutionary leap forward or a smart incremental step in a broader shift, represents a doctrinal change that every defense planner in the region has to take seriously. The economic math of this conflict continues to heavily favor the side that can produce more for less. Right now, by virtually every published analysis, Carnegie, Bruegel, the Foreign Policy Research Institute, the Congressional Research Service, that side is Iran in the drone and missile production calculus. Whether Israel's Iron Beam, Ukraine-sourced Interceptor drone technology, or other lower-cost countermeasures can close that gap fast enough is the central military question of the next 12 months. And sitting underneath all of it, the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's crude oil passes through that channel. The Arash-e Kamangir was deployed right at its entrance. Every week this conflict continues near those waters. Shipping insurance rates rise, tanker companies reroute, and the global energy price signal tightens. Arash the archer drew his bow and fired his arrow. The legend says it flew for an entire day before it landed. We are still watching it fly. Now I want to hear from you directly, because this community always produces the sharpest thinking in the comments. Here's the question I want you to answer. Do you think Iran's deliberate shift toward cheap mobile distributed weapon systems, the drone math, the pop-up air defenses, the asymmetric economics, fundamentally changes the military balance in the Middle East long term? Or can technology like the Iron Beam close the gap fast enough to restore deterrence? Drop your answer below. Serious takes only. I read every comment on videos like this one, and the conversation here is always worth joining.